So here's the thing. Nobody wanted to hear when he said it out loud. The prediction Elon Musk made wasn't a movie plot or a doomsday clock. It was a fork. By the year 2050, civilization either feels like a renaissance, more energy, more kids, more frontier, more purpose, or it feels like a long hallway with the lights slowly dimming. And the part that freaked people out wasn't the fork itself. It was how calmly he said it, like someone reading a weather report. If we keep doing what we're doing, the line bends towards smaller, older, slower. If we decide to build like maniacs and solve the hard problems, the line bends toward bigger, younger, faster, and maybe a whole second home in the sky. And when he first said it, a lot of smart people rolled their eyes. Nobody believed him, because it doesn't feel like collapse when your phone still works. And the grocery store still has blueberries in winter. It doesn't feel like a revolution when the robot arm is just stacking boxes in a warehouse. It doesn't feel like destiny when you're watching a rocket explode on a launch pad and he's on Twitter shrugging and saying, "That's progress." But zoom out, look at the curves, not the headlines. That's what he was pointing at. That's the terrifying part. The future changes slowly, and then all at once, and by the time you notice, the furniture is already moved. Let me talk to you. Like we're sitting in the green room after a show. No slides, no lecture. Just the picture in my head after a long conversation with a guy who builds cars like phones and rockets like Lego. His 2050 prediction breaks into 5 pieces: people, intelligence, energy, industry, and insurance. People is population. Intelligence is artificial minds. Energy is how we power the party. Industry is whether we still make real things or just scroll. Insurance is the backup plan, the one with red dust and a pale sky first. People, this is the piece that made everyone go, "Nah, it can't be." Because you look around and cities feel crowded and the internet is loud and the roads are full. But the birth charts don't care about traffic. They're quiet. They're just pointing down in a lot of places that matter if you want a civilization to keep inventing and paying for big dreams. If you run out the math, you don't hit a wall tomorrow. You hit weirdness over decades, more grandparents than babies. Whole towns slowly emptying, schools merging, companies wondering why they can't hire, governments arguing over how to fund anything when fewer workers are supporting more retirees. And then you wake up in 2050 and realize the average human on Earth is older than you ever imagined. And the cultures that used to hum with noisy teenagers and cheap rent are now careful and tired. His point wasn't have kids because I said so. It was civilizations are engines, and engines need fuel, and one kind of fuel is human potential. You want explorers, founders, teachers, builders, nurses, artists, people with energy and years ahead of them. You want noisy families and parks full of strollers and a future you can picture. He said if we don't fix the incentives around family life, housing that isn't insane, childcare that doesn't bankrupt you, neighborhoods that actually support parents, then by 2050, we'll be rich in museums and poor in kids, and once that curve turns down, it's hard to turn back up. The lag is brutal. Nobody believed him because the president is so loud, but you don't steer a ship by listening to the engine room. You look at the compass. Second, intelligence. Now we're in the part of the prediction that sounds like science fiction until you realize your email is already being written by a machine and your car already parks itself better than your uncle. He said very casually that by 2050, the default is going to be machines do almost everything that can be written down. Any repeatable process, any decision tree, any map from inputs to outputs, gone, moved to silicon, not with perfect accuracy, not with soul, but with speed and a price tag you can't beat. That sounds exciting when you imagine a robot doing your taxes. It sounds terrifying when you imagine your job is made of little pieces that can be written down. And here's the twist he kept hammering. The first wave isn't about replacing the bottom, it's about compressing the middle managers, mid-level analysts, the folks who sit between raw data and decisions. The machine doesn't get bored, it doesn't ask for a raise, it doesn't take lunch, it just chews. And by 2050, he said, a lot of organizations will be tiny on paper and huge in output, because the middle layer that used to be human is going to be code. That's not a moral judgment, that's a prediction about where the leverage is. What do you do with that if you're a person who likes food and rent? He said, learn to work with the machine like it's a power tool. Don't stand in front of it, stand behind it. Become the person who can point it, question it, correct it, and then go outside and touch something real. Which brings us to the third piece, energy. Because all the intelligence in the world is just a very fast thinker in a dark room if you don't have power. Here, he gets almost annoyingly practical. He's not in love with slogans. He's in love with kilowatt whores and the stuff that stores them. By 2050, his map has more of everything. More solar, more wind, more storage, more nuclear, more ways to turn the sun and the earth into work without choking ourselves. And he's not talking about cute little eco-villages. He's talking about industrial scale, fields of panels, forests of turbines, batteries stacked like warehouses, reactors that look like gym bags in concrete sleeves, and a grid that can actually move power from where it is to where people are without starting a fire every summer. Why does that feel terrifying? Because it means we have to build, we have to pour materials into the ground and stand still against the sky. We have to say yes, more than we say. We'll get back to you in 17 years when the forms are complete. Right now, we're a culture that likes to argue. He's saying by 2050, we're either a culture that builds or a culture that curates. If you pick curate, you get beautiful coffee shops and very fragile systems. If you pick build, you get dust, noise, and power to run the future. You choose fourth industry. He sees a world in 2050 where the countries that still make things cars, chips, cranes, trains, ships, rockets run the table. You can't stream yourself to a hospital bed that doesn't exist. You can't like your way to a bridge. He's obsessed with manufacturing. Not because it's romantic, but because it's leverage. One factory that hums feeds 1,000 families and supplies 10 other factories. It's the base of the pyramid. And if you let that rot, you end up importing your backbone from people who might not like you very much in 20 years. His terrifying prediction here is weirdly hopeful. He says the tools exist right now to make building cheaper and faster robots that weld all night, printers that spit out parts you use to order across an ocean, software that maps a factory like a brain maps, a body. If we lean into that, by 2050 we have a renaissance of local industry. Neighborhoods defined by the thing they make, not the show they stream. If we don't, by 2050, we're a service economy on top of a hollow base, and every shock ripples through us like a tuning fork. Nobody believed him because the mall still had shoes in stock. But remember the toilet paper thing? Systems look invincible until a tiny hit reveals they were held together with wishes. And then there's the insurance policy, the red planet. Every time he says multi-planet species, half the room hears poetry, and the other half hears a bank statement. He means both. By 2050, his prediction is that the supply chain exists, heavy lift rockets, tanker ships in orbit, refueling like pit stops, cargo landing on another world without craters for breakfast, habitats slowly getting stitched together out of local stuff and shipped in magic, not a city. Like you're imagining with neon and diners, an outpost, a stubborn seed, a place where a few thousand people can live, work, fix things, and not die if a cable snaps, a backup for the worst day you hope never comes. Why does that terrify people? Because it forces you to admit the universe is not your mom. It doesn't owe you good weather, it throws rocks, it cooks up pandemics, it gives you stars to make you feel small and radiation to keep you honest. He's not predicting doom, he's predicting variance, and the adult move when variance exists is to diversify, do the hard thing before you need it. That's all Mars by 2050. Is a hedge a human habit? We plant food before winter. Okay, zoom back. Why didn't people believe him when he laid all this out? Because every single piece of that prediction requires us to stop being spectators and start being builders again. It requires us to say yes here and yes now. And we have a culture that got very good at saying maybe later. We learned to outsource hard work to tomorrow and someone else. And the terrifying part is realizing there is no someone else. There's just us. Here's what it looks like on the ground, if he's right. You wake up in 2050, and your city is either humming or brittle. Humming looks like cranes, apprentices, clean buses that actually arrive. Power you don't think about, parks full of kids, and grocery stores with local stuff that isn't just a marketing label. Brittle looks like nice coffee and rolling blackouts, and a lot of talk about how we used to make things here. Humming looks like small schools with teachers who can pay rent and workshops next door where teenagers learn to fix robots. Brittle looks like empty campuses and a bunch of adults trying to go back to school online while the rent eats their savings. Humming looks like neighborhoods with 3 generations. Strollers and wheelchairs and teenagers skating the same block. Brittle looks like a city of 30 and 40-somethings with dogs, and a lot of podcasts about loneliness. And your job in the humming world. Work feels like a duet with the machine. You use tools that write first drafts, tools that schedule, tools that design mock-ups you refine with your taste, Tools that debug the code you wrote at 2 in the morning, and then you go touch reality, you install, you deliver, you teach, you explain, you invent the next thing the tool can't. In the brittle world, work feels like arguing with a chatbot, while your boss asks you to produce more slides that nobody reads. Same machine, different posture. One is a crowbar, the other is a treadmill. Now, here's a piece he said that's stuck like a splinter. If you don't build, you drift. There is no steady state in human culture. You're either pushing something uphill together or sliding down into comfort and complaint. By 2050, that drift shows up as a mood, lots of entertainment, little achievement, big opinions, small projects. He wasn't angry about it. He was clinical, like a coach who knows the team is out of shape and also knows the fix is simple and hard. Show up, lift, run, repeat together. So what do we do with a prediction like that? How do you talk to your kids about 2050 without freaking them out? Here's the translation. I'd give a high school senior in a hoodie who thinks the world is cooked. You are alive at the most leverage. Heavy moment in history. You have access to tools that make your grandparents look like cavemen in the best way. Learn to talk to machines. Learn to build with your hands. Learn to read old books. So you remember we've been through crazy before. Pick a thing that exists in the real world. Homes, food, power, transport, medicine, education, and push. Find friends who like to ship more than they like to tweet. Don't ask permission from people whose only skill is saying no. And when you feel the loneliness creeping in from all the screens, go find a room and help someone carry a couch. On the policy level. Yeah, I know, boring. His prediction only flips from terrifying to thrilling if grown-ups. Clear the brush. Faster paths to yes for energy projects. Less insane rules for building homes families can afford. Visas that say, do you want to help? Cool. Come in. Let's be friends. Schools that teach kids how to use tools, not just pass tests. And a moral culture that says families are a public good, not a private hobby. That last one sounds soft. It's not. It's the multiplier for all the others. We haven't even talked about health. In his 2050, medicine feels less like a miracle you beg for, and more like maintenance you plan. Sensors catch problems early. Surgeons use robotic hands that never shake. Treatments are tailored. The scary part is privacy and access. Who owns your body's data? Who gets the magic and who gets the line out the door? He drops that question like a stone and stares at you until you admit we need to build more clinics, train more practitioners, and cut the nonsense that keeps smart kids out of medicine because they can't afford the entrance fee. Transport boring until it stops working. In the good timeline, streets are designed for humans again. Safer, cleaner, quieter. Cars that drive themselves most of the time in most places. Not perfect, just better than angry texting apes. Freight that moves at night, so your city feels like a city, not a truck stop. And big metal birds that still fly, maybe faster, maybe on fuel, made by sunlight and carbon pulled from the air, in the bad timeline. You're still circling for parking while a drone drops your neighbor's burrito in the wrong yard. And then the cultural part. The one he's weirdly romantic about for a guy who builds with steel. He thinks 2050 is either a time when people believe in the future again, or a time when people pretend they do, and secretly don't. Belief shows up as birth announcements and volunteer sign-ups in local clubs where you actually meet and not just like. It shows up as fewer snarky jokes about how everything is terrible and more Saturday mornings, where you grab a hammer and help your friend finish the shed. He's not corny about it, he's blunt. If you don't like your culture, build a new one and make it too fun to ignore. What about the nightmare stuff? Everyone assumes he's hiding. Runaway machines, bad actors with cheap power, the rich blasting off to Mars, while the rest of us fight over the last avocado toast. He doesn't wave it away. He plans around it, align the machines by making them answer to humans who actually build things, not to vibes. Distribute power, literally, the electricity. So no single failure takes out a region, and Mars, he laughs. Nobody's fleeing, it's too hard. It's the opposite of running away. It's the definition of staying and building, just somewhere very, very inconvenient. Here's where I land after living with this prediction for a while. The terrifying part is not that 2050 might be full of robots and rockets. The terrifying part is that it might be full of empty playgrounds and museums with great exhibits about the 20th century. The thrilling part is that the tools to choose the other path are in our hands: power, software, factories, families, courage. Nobody believed him at first, because believing means you don't get to sit down. Believing means you put on boots. So picture a day in the good version of 2050. You wake up in a quiet, dense neighborhood where the rent doesn't hurt. Kids are yelling happily on their way to school. You walk to a workshop where your team ships physical things and digital things in the same breath. Your assistant is an artificial mind that drafts, schedules, and warns you when you're about to make a dumb decision, and you thank it like a person, because you're polite. Lunch is with your parents, who live 10 minutes away, because we finally built for that. After work, you take a bus that whispers instead of screams, because the motors are electric and the grid is strong. The lights don't flicker in summer. The air smells like rain, not exhaust. And on your phone, because yes, they still exist. You watch a live feed of a cargo ship landing on a dusty plain under a small sun, and you don't cry because it's normal. It's not a spectacle. It's the mail. Now picture a day in the bad version. You wake up, scroll through fear, make content you don't love for a company that doesn't care, order dinner you can barely afford, and argue with a stranger while the power blinks, because the grid is old. The parks are empty, the jokes are mean, the future is a punchline. He's saying the distance between those 2 days is not fate. It's choice plus work. I know what you're thinking. Okay, Joe, cool speech. What do I do on Monday? Here's the most practical answer I can give you in a paragraph. Pick one thing you can touch: a school, a clinic, a workshop, a garden, a startup that makes a real object. Give it your time. Learn a tool that scares you because it's new. Help someone younger than you, get good at it. Vote like infrastructure matters more than tweets. Say yes to a project that will make your neighborhood better in a way you can point at, and treat your family like they are not a side quest but the main game. If enough of us do that, 2050 isn't terrifying. It's heavy. Heavy is good. Heavy means you're carrying something that matters. Zone more story, and I'll shut up. He told me about the first time a big rocket blew up in a way that would have killed a company run by a normal person. The teams were crushed. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "We're just going to try again, faster." Not because failure didn't hurt, but because the goal didn't change. That's the 2050 mindset. Not blind optimism, stubborn optimism. The kind that looks at a brick wall and starts looking for handholds, instead of writing a poem about the wall. So, yeah, Elon Musk's terrifying 2050 prediction sounds like a headline designed to make you click. But underneath it is something simple and boring and true. Civilizations that build get a future. Civilizations that stop building get stories about their past. You can live in either, you get to help choose. Nobody believed him when he said it because nobody believes a mirror. But that's all it is. A mirror with a calendar glued to the top. Look, decide, move. And if we do end up in that better version, more kids, more power, more factories, more art, more hospitals, more teachers, more rockets, more reasons to get up in the morning. People will look back at the 2020s and say, that's when the grown-ups showed up. Not all at once, not with a drum roll, just one after another, deciding to be the kind of people who build. That's the whole prediction. That's the whole Dare 2050. Won't be a surprise. It'll be a receipt. You wanted it straight. No fluff. So here's the last line, as clean as it gets. By the year 2050, if we don't fix population, power, production, and purpose, the world feels older, dimmer, and meaner. If we do, the world feels younger, brighter, faster, and kinder, and we've got a second sunrise waiting over a different horizon. Nobody believed him. That's fine. Belief isn't required. Bricks are.